If you're a tired parent who wishes you could make sense of your baby's sleep so you can support sleep with confidence and without sleep training, then I've got some news to share with you. Enrollment in the Confident and Connected Baby Sleep Program is open. This is an online sleep coaching group specifically for parents like you who want to have holistic strategies to help sleep become easier. In this program, we cover the basics of baby sleep development, attachment-based strategies that don't require separation, how to set up a routine or rhythm to your day and bedtime to make sleep easier. We explore temperament, the sensory system, and health issues that impact sleep. And we talk about how to take care of yourself while you take care of your baby's sleep. In the Confident and Connected Baby Sleep Program, I provide live coaching every week and a community of amazing parents who understand the challenges and rewards of responsive, holistic sleep parenting. This is a 12-plus month program. This means that I'm supporting you through the sleep challenges you're having now, and I get to be your sleep coach in your back pocket for whenever you hit a bump in the road along the way. So if you're ready to stop throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to make sense of your baby's sleep without sleep training, the next step to do is book a call with me to talk about whether this is the right fit for you. You can book a call at familysleep.ca/contact. Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby's sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more. Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of the Baby Sleep Connection. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. Last week, I had the pleasure of presenting at a Life with a Baby event. It was a series that parents were invited to participate in called Parenting Confidently. I almost always say parenting confidentially, but it's parenting confidently. And every week they've had a speaker talking with parents about one aspect of parenting. And I, of course, had the week on baby sleep, and it was a lovely talk. And as I prepared for this week's podcast, wondering what to focus on and how to keep it short and sweet because we're heading into the holiday weekend. It is Canadian Thanksgiving this weekend. And so what could I do that could bring you some clarity around supporting your baby's sleep holistically and supporting it with attachment and development in mind? Well, keeping it pretty short and hopefully not having to edit it at all. Although my household tends to be very busy even at 9 o'clock at night because I have a teenager and on the brink of a second teenager in the house. So if there is noise, it's them going through their bedtime routine and or moving around the house. Let's focus on me giving you a little bit of a recap of what I gave the parents at the Parenting Confidentially. There you go again, Parenting Confidently. Last week, I decided that in the time that I had, this was a very short presentation. I had about 20 minutes, 30 minutes top, to talk about sleep, and I didn't want to try to cover everything because if there's one thing that an overwhelmed, exhausted parent doesn't need, it is a whole knowledge dump, a whole bunch of information that's going to leave them knowing nothing more than they came in with because now they're overwhelmed, even more overwhelmed than they walked in. So there were 2 points that I made last week, and I want to make them really super clear in this podcast for you too. 2 main ideas that I want you to hold on to as you are riding through this chaotic ride of infant sleep development for your baby. The first is that sleep is developmental. The second one, because yes, I'm going to give you both of them right off the top. The second one is to know your baby. So I'm going to break that down for you. The first one being looking at understanding sleep as a developmental process. We know, and it's not just from looking at how babies sleep. If we look at their brains, they're going to look different from an adult brain. And we also know that the behavior is different. If we look at the sleep cycles and measure brain activity, they're different. Sleep development takes time because a baby's brain is really immature. We're looking at what are the things that actually impact a baby in developing any of the skills they have, including sleep. I'll pause too to just kind of add this little side point. When we're talking about development, it can be really easy for a lot of other milestones to acknowledge that this is a developmental process that takes time. And I often use walking as an example. We may be really anxious or full of anticipation about when our kiddos will walk, but we don't consider it our job to make them walk sooner than they would if we simply gave them the environment that allowed them to pull up on things and to have our faces light up when they make the effort to walk. None of that seems to apply to sleep for us in a sleep training culture. We have this impression that it's our job to make it happen sooner, faster, and better than it would if it was just left on its own. And that, in fact, if we don't do anything about it at all, sleep will never, ever be good. And I've talked about that before, and it's a theme that comes up over and over again because the parents that I work with know cognitively that sleep is developmental and takes time. But emotionally and with all the narrative around sleep, it's easy to slip into thinking that it's not developmental. It's a skill that relies completely on teaching. So we know the brain is really immature. We know that the structures that are in place that help us manage stress or separation or new situations is much more fully developed than an infant, and it allows us to use both our emotional brain, which might fly us into a bit of a whirlwind if there's a challenge presented to us. But then our logical brain kicks in and says, well, wait a second. We've been here before. We have experience. We know how this works. Shake it off, or take a deep breath, or talk to a friend, or use self-talk to realize this is not a catastrophe we can get through. We also use others around us to co-regulate, of course. But with babies, they don't have that structure to kick in that logical brain. That isn't there yet. So we know that they need someone else, and usually that's a loving parent or caregiver, to provide the reassurance that everything is right in the world and allow them to fall asleep. We also know, however, that hormones are a huge part of sleep. We know that nighttime sleep happens. We fall asleep. We're drawn into sleep because melatonin kicks in the evening as the sun is setting. And we know that that drops by the middle of the night. And early in the morning, it's replaced with cortisol, the stress hormone, the hormone that allows us to have enough going on in our bodies to get us out of bed in the morning. Babies don't have those in place yet. In fact, I think it was one study that was looking at measuring melatonin, and babies get it in utero a little bit, not a lot. They're born, of course, with no circadian rhythm at all, so they might have a little bit of melatonin, but their whole system is not all that well designed for releasing things on a clock, a 24-hour clock with the sun rising and the sun setting. And it's not until about 3 months that we can even measure any existence of melatonin that's being produced by the body. So we can't expect bedtime sleep to look the same as an adult's because of those two things: the structure of their brain, and the hormones. So if we looked at sleep being more like walking, perhaps we'd have a little bit more patience to know that this little brain is doing a lot of growing and a lot of developing. And as the skill starts to be even a possibility of sleeping through the night, that's where our nurturing and our responsiveness allows them to build on that co-regulation and be able to sleep well. I'll move to point number 2 now. And point number 2 is to understand your baby, get to know who they are. So on one hand, it's about understanding development, and on the other, it's understanding your baby. I talk often about parenting the baby in front of us. We could wish and hope and pray that our babies were high sleep need babies that sleep more than average, because there are some. I don't meet many of them, of course, in my sleep practice, but there are some babies who are sleeping a lot. Some where parents are actually worried their baby is sleeping too much. And I know that that's not common, but for any of those of you out there who have babies that are sleeping way more, and you're having to wake them up for feeds, or you're worried about their regulation at night, it is challenging because it's almost like a little secret that you don't want to share, that you're actually worried that your baby is sleeping more than they should, because most of what we hear and most of the time what happens is babies are having interrupted sleep and not sleeping long periods. And that's the pain point, the challenge for parents. So if we're looking at how do we understand our babies well enough to support them well in sleep, it comes down to two main things in my view. And the first is sensory. Understanding what sensory experiences does your baby need to feel safe and secure and settle their nervous system enough to fall asleep. Some babies are real seekers of sensory experiences, so they may seek out and want things like rocking and movement and sound and touch, and that they find that very comforting and it helps them sleep. Other babies are avoidant. They may not want the movement. They may do better in a very dark room with no sound. And understanding kind of what your baby's sensory personality or sensory profile is can be really helpful in figuring out what is it that you can do as their loving parent to provide something that helps their nervous system to relax into sleep. We know that many babies love rocking. It's why we, as parents, eventually just develop this intuitive rocking motion, even when we see other babies in the arms of other parents. But figuring out what kind of touch, do they like deep pressure? Do they love hugs, or does that bother them? Are they attracted to the smell as a reset or as a nervous system regulation? And smell being one of the most powerful ways to use senses to calm and regulate us. I will say that it is our smell as parents that our kids are seeking out to feel safer and secure. Because if they can smell you, the assumption is that they can also see you, hear you, and feel you. And in some cases, when you're nursing, taste you as well. So when we're looking at understanding sensory, it's really helpful just to look around at your day and look at the experiences that your baby is getting, and do these experiences match with certain sensory experiences that you can start sprinkling through the day or leaning on when you're looking at ways to calm them down or even rev them up. And it's valuable to look at sensory because we are sensory beings. Our babies are learning so much through the senses. And when we can look at it through that lens of what are the sensory experiences my baby needs, then we can give them more of what they need. The second piece to this, of course, in my view, when I look at the main things that we're looking at when we're trying to understand our babies to be able to support them for sleep easier, is temperament. And that is understanding the innate, who is your baby kind of question. Now, I had a parent say to me the other day, and it was really interesting. I was asking them about their baby's temperament, because when I can understand a baby's temperament, my strategies can be tailored to that temperament. And when parents understand, it's almost like this floodgate of aha moments of how to meet what it is that we're doing to support sleep to match that with temperament. And I said, does your baby tend to be stubborn or persistent? And they're like, yeah, no, my baby is stubborn, but by the time they're an adult, they'll be persistent. And I thought, I love the way of thinking about that stubbornness, I feel like stubbornness is a little bit more negative, not looked on as refining quality, but persistence is. And I wonder too, whether stubbornness is when we say no or refuse to cooperate simply because of our ego. We know children they're very ego oriented, and whether persistence is when we have that drive to not give up on a vision or outcome that we want. And so maybe it's maturity, but maybe it's also a little bit of kind of how much of our ego we're bringing in, whether we call it stubbornness or persistence. But understanding how persistent our babies are, understanding if they need very particular things to be able to sleep, like very finicky. Some babies are very regular, and regularity can be with poops, but it can also be with sleep schedules. These are the parents that report to me that their baby's sleep could be measured on an atomic clock. Like it is so refined, right down to the minute, that they could set their watches by it. Temperament is also how adaptable we are, and babies are, because of course we have our own temperament. adaptable to change. How adaptable are we to something being different than usual? So temperament, I mean, there's other domains with temperament, but those are a few. Temperament can really help guide us in understanding why it looks this way. And for parents that have more than one kid, it becomes a real eye-opener to realize, oh, all of the experiences, or so many of the experiences we were having with our firstborn, we just thought that was what babyhood was all about. But now that we have a secondborn, we realize they are two very unique human beings with very different temperaments. And now we see it wasn't our parenting, or it wasn't the conditions in which they were born, although both those factors play a role. It was temperament really guiding the behavior of their baby. And to understand that can go a long way. There is a third part to understanding your baby that I do want to add in, though, and that is understanding what their individual sleep needs are. Parents are often asking me, how much sleep should my baby be getting? How many naps should they be getting? How long should they be sleeping at night? When should their bedtime be? And I explain that although we have ranges, they are really broad ranges and aren't going to help very much at all, other than to say we're at least in the ballpark of what you'd expect for total sleep for this age. When we look at your baby's individual sleep needs, though, and I know you've probably heard these terms of like nighthawk and early bird or lark, where some people stay up late naturally, others wake up early. Some babies and human beings in general need more sleep than average, and some need less. And for a parent who has a low sleep needs baby, who is trying to get them to be an average sleep needs baby, well, you can imagine that you're going to meet with a lot of resistance and a lot of frustration for both of you. And so appreciating that your baby may not need as much sleep as average, and that trying to get them more sleep is not going to work, because sleep is a need that gets met. Once that sleep pressure wanes, then that's it. Their sleep bank is all set. They don't need to add more sleep to their bank. They'll withdraw from that bank the longer they're awake, and sleep will happen again, but it may not happen as soon or for as long if you're trying to put way too much sleep into that sleep bank for them. So in summary, these really are, I think if you can take these two key points and carry them with you when you're running into challenges with sleep, the first being that sleep is developmental and it takes way longer than we're told. It's at least 3 years before it even starts looking like adult sleep on a consistent basis. And then the second is if you understand your baby, their sensory likes and dislikes, and their temperament, as well as their sleep needs. These two main ideas can take you a long way in supporting your baby's sleep with feeling less frustrated and exhausted, because you're understanding the landscape of sleep better. So I'll wrap up there. I hope this was helpful to you. I look forward to having you join me on the next episode. And until then, have a wonderful night. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information, and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.